Germans start the bombing, attacking Poland. The Second World War begins with terror from the sky. Hitler has reconstructed Germany for war and built a military juggernaut too great for Poland to resist.
The Second World War represents one of the most visually recorded conflicts in history, with thousands of photographs and films capturing its main events, which for many people is widely recognized as symbols of this era, quickly bringing to mind the harsh reality of a global war that lasted until 1945. However, in today's digital world, many other photographs have spread across the internet, as if they truly belong to that historical period. This often happens because of confusion, digital editing, or the fast spread of viral content on social media platforms and online forums. For many historians, this rarely discussed issue not only changes how people understand history, but also shows the importance of careful research in telling the difference between what is real and what only appears to be real. Today, we will carefully examine and correct 7 photographs that are often shared as real documents from the Second World War, but actually come from later films or modern recreations. Before continuing, I want to clearly explain that most of the discoveries you will see today come from the detailed work of the blog Fake History Hunter, which is where I found most of these images. If you want to explore each case more deeply with extra details and original sources, you will find a direct link to the site in the video description. Number 7. Hugo Boss in the Nazi uniforms. On social media and history forums, it is very common to see these images presented as real Hugo Boss advertisements promoting uniforms of the Third Reich. The captions often claim that the famous German brand personally designed the black SS uniforms and Wehrmacht clothing. However, none of these claims are correct. These so-called advertisements are actually digital edits made from real drawings but used in the wrong context. Any careful observer can notice several clear mistakes. First, the text is written in English, which would not make sense for an advertisement aimed at the German public in the 1930s. Second, one of the posters mentions a collection from 1934, but shows uniforms that were introduced years later. So where do these images really come from? They were created by British illustrator Pierre Turner and were first published in 1980 in the book German Uniforms of the Third Reich, released by Blandford Press. As for the real role of Hugo Boss during the Third Reich, the truth is much simpler. Hugo Ferdinand Boss owned a small workwear factory in Metzingen. Starting in 1928, he received orders from the Nazi Party to produce brown shirts and later standard uniforms for the Army, Navy, and other groups. The designs were always provided by official authorities, while his company only produced them in large numbers. By 1940, the factory had around 250 workers, many of whom were prisoners of war and forced laborers. It remained just a medium-sized business among many others supplying the German war effort. In conclusion, Hugo Boss did not design Nazi uniforms. He only manufactured them like many other companies, while the designs came entirely from official offices. Number 6. Wojtek, Truth and Myth. The story of Wojtek is one of the most unusual and touching stories of the Second World War. In 1942, soldiers from the 22nd Artillery Supply Company of the Polish Second Corps in Iran found a young Syrian brown bear. The animal was adopted by the unit and officially given the rank of private so he could receive food and transportation, and later he was even promoted to corporal. Wojtek traveled with the soldiers to the Battle of Monte Cassino, where he helped carry ammunition boxes. After the war, he lived in the Edinburgh Zoo until his death in 1963. All of this is fully documented and remains an important part of Polish history. However, Wojtek's popularity on the internet has created a problem: the spread of fake or wrongly labeled images. Among the most common are photos showing a bear serving in the German army, often next to paratroopers. These images are shared with claims that they show the real Wojtek fighting for the Axis side, which is completely false and also offensive to those who know the true story. It is not difficult to trace where these images come from. Most of them come from 2 known sources. The first source is material from the German short film Bear, made in 2014 by Pascal Florx, which tells a fictional story about a bear in a paratrooper unit. Some scenes were taken, edited, and shared as if they were real historical photos. The second source includes real photographs of a large teddy bear named Misha, placed near a road close to Leningrad in 1942 as a fun attraction for German soldiers. Because it looked realistic, some people later confused these images with Wojtek. In reality, Wojtek never wore a German uniform and was never near German forces. Real photos of him with Polish soldiers in Iran, Egypt, Italy, and Scotland are widely available in archives. Number 5. A female fighter with a Sturmgewehr 44. This photograph has appeared on many websites and social media pages, usually with the caption, "Female resistance fighter holding a Sturmgewehr 44 taken from a dead German soldier." This statement is completely wrong. In this case, the image looks very convincing, and at first glance appears to be a real photograph taken in an Eastern European forest between 1943 and 1945. The young woman's appearance plays a big role in making it believable. Her headscarf, her serious and strong expression, and the presence of one of the first modern assault rifles make the scene feel real. It is true that by late 1944, partisans from Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, and Poland used these weapons after capturing them from German troops. However, a closer look at the rifle shows a clear mistake. The weapon has a marking from American Tactical, a company from the United States that was created many years after the war and produces replica firearms. No original Sturmgewehr 44 ever had such a mark. Once this detail is noticed, the truth becomes clear. The photograph was taken in 2012 by American photographer Oleg Volk. The model in the image is named April, who often appears in historical-style photo shoots. The original image, along with other photos from the same session, including color versions, can be found on the photographer's blog. So this is not a real wartime image, but a modern recreation made about 70 years after the war ended. Number 4, the execution of a German deserter. This black and white photograph shows a soldier tied to a post in front of a firing squad and is often shared as real evidence of a German deserter being executed during the war. However, this is another misunderstanding. The scene looks too staged. The firing squad is not standing in a straight line but in a V shape, and one soldier stands much closer to the condemned man than the others. Also, the distance between the shooters and the wall is very short, which would be dangerous in a real situation because of bullet ricochets. The truth becomes clear when the original source is found. The image is actually taken from the West German film Kerms, released in 1960 and directed by Wolfgang Stauta. The movie tells the story of a young deserter executed near the end of the war, whose remains are later discovered. The execution scene appears at 11 minutes and 47 seconds in the film and was created to show the chaos of the final days of 1945. Although the story is based on real history, between 15,000 and 20,000 German soldiers were executed for desertion. The image itself is fictional and not a real historical photograph. Number 3, a sniper falling from a tower. This photograph shows a soldier falling from a tower and is often described as the exact moment an Axis sniper was shot during a battle in Italy. This claim is false. A closer look reveals several details that do not match a real combat situation. The body does not fall naturally, but in a controlled way, as if the person is preparing to land safely, which is typical of a stunt. The area where the person lands is also hidden by debris, a common film trick used to hide safety equipment. In addition, such a dramatic image does not appear in any wartime archive or historical record. The real source of the image is the American film Darby's Rangers, released in 1958 and directed by William Wellman. The fall was performed by a professional stuntman, likely Dick Crockett or Bob Herron. The full scene can be seen at 5 minutes and 36 seconds in a clip shared by Warner Brothers. So this is not a real moment from a battle, but a planned stunt filmed 14 years after the war ended. Number 2, the crying young soldier. This is one of the most famous images incorrectly presented as a real photograph from the Second World War. It shows a young soldier crying while another tries to comfort him, and is often described as a German teenager during the final days of the war in April 1945. However, this image does not come from a real wartime source. It is taken from the German film Die Brücke, The Bridge, released in 1959 and directed by Bernhard Wicki. The film is based on the real experiences of Gregor Dorfmeister, who was forced into service at the age of 16 near the end of the war. The scene shows a young soldier breaking down in fear while his comrades try to calm him. The character is Klaus Hager, played by Volker Lechtenbrink. The story follows 7 teenage boys from a small town who are forced to defend a bridge that has no real military value. Even though the film is extremely realistic and carefully made, it is still a fictional story. Therefore, this emotional image is not a real moment from 1945, but a scene from a film made 14 years after the war ended. Number 1, the BDM girls who never existed. This photograph, which shows a group of young women wearing sports shirts marked with the Imperial Eagle symbol of the Third Reich, while an instructor stands in front of them and checks their appearance, is often shared online as a real image of the Bund Deutscher Mädel, also known as the League of German Girls, which was the female branch of the Nazi Party youth movement during that time. However, the image and the original scene do not come from any official archive or real press agency from that period. In reality, it is a still taken from a German film released in 1958 called Blitzmädels and Die Front, directed by Werner Klingler. The film presents a serious and direct war story that recreates the role and mobilization of female signals helpers of the Luftwaffe, known as Blitzmädel, during the final months of the war. But how did this image end up being mistaken for a real photograph from the Second World War? At first, the still image appeared online with a small watermark that included the title of the film. Once that watermark was removed or cropped out, the image started spreading widely across the internet, and many people began to believe it was a real document from the 1940s. The confusion is easy to understand. The film was made only 13 years after the war ended, using uniforms, props, and locations that were very accurate for the time, and it was written by someone who had personally experienced the war. Even with this high level of detail and realism, it is still a carefully created film scene made in 1958. Not a real photograph taken between 1939 and 1945. So when this image appears again on social media or in different publications, you now know its real origin and the truth behind it.